You're listening to the PuckUps Podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian D. Felice.
Welcome into episode 4 of the PuckUps Podcast. I am Brian D. Felice, and thank you all very much for being here. The Boston Bruins winning streak came to an end at 6 games on Tuesday night following their 6-2 loss to the Dallas Stars. The good news, however, is that they did get back into the win column on Thursday following a 4-3 win over the Vegas Golden Knights. So we'll talk about both of those games in greater detail. Also, a rivalry renewed. Whoever could I be talking about? Well, here's a hint. They'll be playing each other Saturday night at the Garden. And then we'll finish off with a Q&A from you, the listeners. Now, before we get any further, just a friendly reminder to please subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. If you want to be a part of the show, you can email me, info@thepuckups.com. You can tweet at me online at Brian D. Felice _. You can tweet at the show at the PuckUps, or you can even call to leave a voicemail to be aired on the show at 617-539-6958. Again, that's 617-539-6958. Now, before we get into the Bruins-Dallas game, let's just catch ourselves up to speed on where the Bruins currently sit in the Atlantic Division standings and the Eastern Conference playoff race. So right now, the Bruins have a record of 29, 20, and 2. They have 60 points on the year. That's good for 5th in the Atlantic Division in both points and points percentage, as well as wild card 2 on both points and points percentage. So as we speak, the Bruins are in a playoff position. And that is why their game against Dallas was rather disappointing, because they had been playing some of the best hockey of the season, and they're going into Dallas to play one of the best teams in the Western Conference when they're on their game, right? Dallas's roster is a Stanley Cup contender. They have so much talent, so much speed, skill, and size, especially up front. I mean, when they're healthy, Mikko Rantanen, Jason Robertson, Roope Hintz, just to name a couple. Wyatt Johnston obviously has a ton of skill. Maverick Bourque has some skill. Jamie Benn's a good veteran. Tyler Sagan's out for the season. He's more of a role player at this point in his career, middle six role player. But Dallas has tons of skill and speed up front and size. On the back end, they're obviously led by Miro Heiskanen. You have Thomas Harley. You have Esa Lindell. In net, you have Jake Ottinger. I mean, Dallas is just a very, very deep team. And so for the Bruins to come into Dallas and square dance off against one of the better teams in the NHL while Boston's playing some of their best hockey, it was just a great opportunity for a measuring stick game, simply put. And I thought the Bruins started the game on time. They were fine to start. I felt like both teams were going back and forth a little bit. The first penalty of the game on the Bruins didn't end up costing them on the scoreboard. But I wanted to talk about this play because David Pastrnak gets called for a trip on Matt Duchene off the faceoff. And it's easy to look at the play and say, David, why did you trip Matt Duchene? Why'd you take that penalty? What are you doing? What are you thinking? Well, yes, David was guilty of the trip, and I don't condone him taking that penalty. It obviously wasn't a smart play. But if you go back and you watch that play, Elias Lindholm wins the faceoff clean, and Hampus Lindholm hesitates. The puck is right there for him to take it. It just takes 2 strides. He had a jump on everybody. I'll put it that way. Elias Lindholm was hesitant, and he kind of did the old, should I stay or should I go? Shut out the clash. And next thing you know, now Matt Duchene's like, hey, I got a chance at this puck now too, because Hampus Lindholm's taking a sweet ass time. And the reaction by Pasternak is, oh shit, I got to do something here. So he impedes Matt Duchene, who helps to call out a little bit. But anyway, that penalty didn't cost the Bruins. It was the ensuing two that did. I just didn't like that play all around. You want to face off a game, and by the way, where the Bruins lost 65% of the faceoffs. So one of the few that they did win, right? You're not ready to go. And I'm more so talking to Hampus Lindholm. So that was annoying to watch. You're supposed to be on your toes on a faceoff. Everybody knows that a faceoff is not just center iceman versus center iceman. It's 5-on-5. Your wingers, your D, you got to help out. So that bothered me. As I said, Dallas did not score on that power play. So no harm, no foul, right? The Bruins got a power play of their own after that. They didn't capitalize on it. But then you keep going to the box. You keep giving Dallas, who has the second best power play in the NHL, opportunities. It's going to come back to haunt you. And that's exactly what happened. Elias Lindholm had a needless interference call. You can say Esa Lindell helped it along. I'm sure he did. I'm not saying he's a saint on the play. But don't put yourself in that position. Don't give the refs an opportunity to make an iffy call, right? And so, or better yet, don't give your opposition the opportunity to take a flop. And, Dallas goes back to the power play. And this one by Wyatt Johnson was just fantastic puck movement all the way around by the Dallas Stars. Swayman had no chance on this one. Jeremy Swayman was not great in the second period. I don't think any of the Bruins really were. And in the third period, the game was kind of gone by then. But in the first period, especially early on, I thought Jeremy gave the Bruins a chance to stay in that game. The Wyatt Johnson goal was just very, very quick and efficient puck movement. He had no chance on stopping that goal. So Dallas goes up 1-0, and then Nikita Zadorov takes a cross-checking penalty beneath the goal line. There's going to be some calls that go against Nikita where he's guilty because he's a bigger dude, or somebody flops, or he outmuscles somebody, whatever. This wasn't one of those plays. I mean, this was a penalty. It was a penalty. You gotta call it the way that it is. So Nikita goes to the box, Dallas back to the power play. And this was a play that I feel like kind of dictated how the rest of the game would go. Jeremy Swayman had an unbelievable stop. And I mean unbelievable. It was probably a save of the year candidate, certainly for the Bruins, but I think throughout the NHL. I'm trying to remember exactly who it was he stopped on the initial shot. It may have been Rupe Hintz, but whoever it was, whatever star player it was, they had a gaping net. And Jeremy was able to, after being beat dead to rights, he was able to stretch across and get a paddle on what was an empty net goal, essentially. And that could have been a momentum gaining save for the Boston Bruins on the back of Jeremy Swayman. Maybe you kill off the rest of that penalty, because I feel like it was kind of winding down and the game is still 1-0, and maybe the Bruins find a way to tie the game, and who knows what happens from there. Unfortunately, Jeremy makes the great save, and Andrew Peeke is just kind of slow to react. Certainly slower than the Dallas forward, which was Maverick Bourque. And he gets the rebound instead of the Bruins' own defenseman, and it's 2-0 Dallas. And you go into that period, that intermission, feeling like it's 4-0. I remember the game prior against Chicago. The Bruins similarly were down 2-0 after one. But as a spectator, I remember feeling like it was 2-2. Like, I felt like the Bruins they took the play to Chicago in that first period, and you just kind of felt like the Bruins were going to come back and tie that game and win it. That was the opposite vibe I had after their first period against Dallas. They were down 2-0 against Dallas. I felt like they were down 4-0. So lo and behold, the second period starts. And again, I feel like the Bruins started the period fine. But you go down 3-0 because you lose a face-off clean. One of the biggest takeaways from this game was the fact that Dallas just had their way with the Bruins in the face-off circle. As I said, Dallas won 65% of the draws throughout the course of the game. They won 39 of 60 face-offs. So that's just utter domination. And the Esa Lindell goal was a prime example. Clean face-off win in the offensive zone for Dallas. Quick little D-to-D pass. Nothing shot through bodies. Swayman doesn't see it. No one gets a body on it. And it's 3-0 Stars. So you fast forward, final minute of the second period, and Dallas again. I believe his name is Justin Highcone. I'm not even gonna try his last name. I'm gonna completely butcher it. But anyway, a depth role player for Dallas. It's a nothing play. 30 seconds left in the period. Somehow the puck goes from the side of the goal to the crease, and it trickled. 4-0 Dallas. Game over. So that was a missed opportunity for the Bruins. Missed opportunity to show themselves and show the league just how far they have come to this point in the season. It would have been their 7th win in a row. Had they pulled it off, it would have put them above 500 on the road for the first time since they beat Washington on opening night in Washington. But, of course, Dallas got the win, and Dallas was the better team. They were the better team. I mean, they outshot the Bruins 37-18, and it felt like a lot more than that. Once Dallas went up 6-0 in the third period, I felt like they kind of let the foot off the gas in the last 7-8 minutes, and the Bruins had some garbage time shots. They also had a few garbage time goals, which if you're trying to find some positives from that game, it was the fact that Morgan Geekie got his first goal in 13 games. Now, was it one of his patented one-timers or a nice snapshot wrist shot? No, it wasn't one of those. It was a shot from the point that went off of the shaft of his stick and in. So I'm sure he would have liked to have put one in himself on his own shot. I bet he would feel a little bit better about one of those going in, but you'll take whatever you can get when you're in a goal slump. And so Morgan Geekie got a power play goal late in the game to make it 6-1 in favor of Dallas. And then Fraser Minton got another garbage time goal to make it 6-2. Jeremy Swayman was pulled in the third period after Dallas went up 6-0. So we now know who started the next game. It was obviously Jonas Korpisalo against Vegas. We'll get into that later. It wasn't Jeremy's night, but you know what? When the game was still competitive in the first period, it was, he was there to bail his teammates out. It just so happens that they weren't able to, get the rebound for him on the second Dallas goal. And then in the second period, yeah, I mean, you could sit there and say that he was as guilty as the rest of his teammates because he was, but the Bruins didn't really have that much of a push themselves. So I don't know. I mean, the team kind of sucked for the most part, and Jeremy wasn't good. He had some moments, but he wasn't good either. But yeah, so that's the takeaway from the Dallas game is you just got outclassed pretty much from start to finish, most of it, and you had a feel good moment towards the end with Morgan Geekie. So okay, can it be a teaching moment? Can it be a reminder? You've won 6 games in a row. If you're the Bruins at the time, you had won 8 of 9, and you come into Dallas and you get stomped. You get stomped by the Stars. Can that be a learning experience? Well, Marco Sturm talked about after the game just that.
I couldn't help but overhear you say that the pounding was you take it as a good thing for this?
I do, because that's something I think we have to learn from it, because how I see it is, those guys it's a playoff team, and without even some of the guys are not in the lineup but they're willing to play that kind of style of game, just grind it out and stick with it, and we didn't do it, right? We were still playing cute till right to the end, and you cannot play that way. So that's something I think we just have to learn from it, and that's why I kind of like, if it's a tight game, you're like, oh, we're right there. No, we are not. That just, again, that's for me a positive, because that shows us, we just got to play that kind of style game too, and is not going to game like Chicago every night.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, there are certain games throughout the course of a season where it may have just been one of those bad nights and you kind of toss the film away. There's other games where if you get smoked, right, or pounded, as the reporter said and Marco Sturm said, against what is a Stanley Cup contending team, in my opinion, and in the opinion of I think just about everybody who watches the league. No, you don't just burn that tape. You see what they do well. What did Dallas do well in that game? Right? What did they do well that we can learn from? What didn't we do? What are those winning habits? Do we get too loosey-goosey? Right? I mean, were the Bruins feeling too good about themselves? How could you not? I'm not trying to fault them for it, but you've won 6 games in a row and 8 of 9, and you got your siblings with you on the road trip, and you're having a good time in Dallas. Yeah, maybe the habits slipped for a night, right? But if you're Marco Sturm, you can't just let that slide. You have to say, hey, listen, we have Vegas coming up. We have Montreal coming up. We have been on 2 6-game losing streaks this year. So we have had to go on reciprocal winning streaks afterwards just to get back to where we were in the standings. We can't afford nights off. We're not going to win every game the rest of the season, but we can't have nights off, because if we do, we may not make the playoffs. So that was the message that was sent heading into Thursday against Vegas. And the good news is, not only did the Bruins find a way to get 2 points. Now, was it pretty the whole time? No, we're going to talk about that too. But Boston's start was very, very, very strong and very admirable. So Vegas, again, I talked about how Dallas on paper is a Stanley Cup contender. So is Vegas. I mean, Vegas has Jack Eichel. They have Mitch Marner. They have Mark Stone. They have Tomas Hertl. They have Pavel Dorofeev. Their depth players are Riley Smith and William Karlsson. They have Shea Theodore on the back end. They just acquired Rasmus Anderson, right? I mean, and I'm sure I've missed some key players too, because they have a deep lineup. But Vegas is a cup contender. Now, they've had their own struggles off and on. They just lost to Philly recently, but again, they're coming into Boston with something to prove. They want to get back on the winning column as well. And the Bruins have a game against Montreal on Saturday. So you have to get these points if you're the Bruins. And to their credit, they did come out flying against Vegas. It helps that you get a 4-minute power play in the first period. Alex Steeves takes a high stick. Alex Steeves, by the way, I want to jump back here for a second. He made some news this week because he signed a 2-year contract extension with the Boston Bruins. Alex Steeves signed a 2-year extension with a cap hit of $1.625 million a year through the 2027-2028 season. Now, Alex Steeves has 8 goals this year, 6 assists, 14 points in 34 games played. That is a pace of 15 goals, 11 assists, and 27 points in 65 games this year. That's an 82-game pace, so a full season's worth, of 19 goals, 14 assists, 34 points in 82 games. Pretty good story for Alex Steeves. He's in his mid-20s. I don't even know if he probably, I think he had a couple of NHL games under his belt with Toronto prior to this year with the Bruins, but he's been a 99.9% of his career. He's been in the AHL with the Toronto Marlies. So he comes to Boston as a free agent over the summer, doesn't make the team out of camp. In fact, Alex Steeves was waived by the Bruins after training camp, if you guys remember correctly. So that didn't mean that the Bruins didn't like him. It just meant that there was some heavy competition for some limited roster spots at training camp. And I'm sure the Bruins were praying to God that he was going to get through waivers and not be claimed. But you still run the risk, right? So they were willing to run that risk fortunately for Steves and the Bruins, he did make it through waivers. And when the time came to get the call up to Boston, he took advantage. But it is funny, right? It's interesting that a player can sign in the offseason, a journeyman AHL player can sign for an opportunity, doesn't really make it during camp because it's just a small sample size and GM's got limited time to make choices on the roster. The team waives you, you clear, you get your chance, and then they sign you to an extension. It's funny how that works out, huh? But beyond the production, surprising production for Alex Steves, he's also, I want to say, 32nd in the NHL in hits thrown this year. So I want to say he has like 114 hits or something like that. So listen, he's been an impactful player, Swiss Army knife type of guy that can go up and down the lineup. It's a good signing, right? It's a good signing. You always want a guy that can play up and down the lineup and, you know, and be versatile for you. So he's a hardworking guy, gets it in the forecheck. He can finish when he gets his opportunity. He's shown that he can create offense. Certainly at the AHL level, he was one of the prominent scorers in the American Hockey League for a couple of years prior to this year. So he's done it at the AHL level. It was a mystery if he could do it at the NHL level. And he has shown that he is capable of producing at the highest level. I think next for Alex Steves is finding consistency in his game, consistency in scoring at the highest level. So, but anyway, Alex Steves, back to the Vegas game, takes a high stick from Tomas Hertl, and the Bruins go to the power play. The Bruins make this one count. Charlie McAvoy gets a nice one-timer from the point off a pass from Pasternak. It's Charlie's 4th goal of the year. 3 of his 4 goals have come in the last 7 games. So Charlie's coming along here, and the assists have been there this whole time, but the goal scoring is starting to pile up for him now in recent weeks as well. So McAvoy from Pasternak and Geeky, that's Pasta's 41st assist of the year. He had a 3-point game, by the way. He would get another assist and a goal. And then Elias Lindholm on the second half of the double minor penalty to Tomas Hertl. Morgan Geeky with a fantastic no-look pass to David, who was cutting down the right side, the right hash, right circle. Morgan had the puck, top of the left circle, and he was looking at McAvoy, but he was looking to the top of the umbrella at McAvoy and made the pass down to David. Like I said, the right circle cutting down. So the penalty killers, the PK box, the reason, because when you watch that play, and I know I speak for myself, I said, how the hell did that pass get through? In fact, I thought it was a pretty ill-advised pass. I thought it was a pretty low percentage pass because you had 4 Vegas sticks there. But what I couldn't pick up on live that I saw in the replay was that Morgan's eyes were looking at Charlie. And so the penalty killers were focused on the puck going there. And he had a very, very well executed pass down to David, no-look pass, who then found Elias Lindholm in the bumper for a one-timer, 2-0 lead. That's Elias Lindholm's 9th goal of the year. And again, assists coming from Pasternak and Geeky. So David and Morgan have multiple points halfway through the first period. Then it was the 4th line of Tanner Jeannot, Sean Corrali, and Mark Kaslick letting their presence be known. Tanner Jeannot causes a turnover on the forecheck. Sean Corrali collects it, gets it back to Jeannot, who takes advantage of a broken play. And he has an unreal finish from the left circle that goes top under the crossbar. A goal scorer's goal by Tanner Jeannot. Tanner Jeannot, by the way, he's 12th in the NHL in hits with 147, which is to be expected. That's his MO. He also has now 5 goals on the year, 14 assists, 19 points in 47 games. That is a pace of 8 goals, 23 assists, 31 points in 78 games played this year. It's an 82-game pace of 9 goals, 24 assists, 33 points. Now, Tanner Jeannot was a heavily scrutinized signing this past offseason, and I will put my hand to the sky here. I was very skeptical of it because outside of a 24-goal, 41-point season by Tanner Jeannot with Nashville, which has now been like 6 seasons ago or whatever it was. He's only been like a 15-point guy, like a 10 to 15, 16-point guy the rest of his NHL career. So he's essentially on pace to double what he's put up throughout his season outside of his career year, 41 points. He's already at 19 points. So when you factor in the known commodity of him, which is his physicality, his leadership, I think he's a good guy in the room. Definitely one of those teammates you love to have on your side. He's physical. He can fight. He can forecheck. He's not a liability defensively, but he's also giving you 30 points. If Tanner Jeannot can give you 25 to 35 points, simply put, it's a very good signing for the Bruins, considering everything else that he brings. So he gives the Bruins a 3-0 lead in the first period. Mark Kaslick puts Shea Theodore through the boards on a great forecheck. One of, the Canadiens' top defensemen for the Olympic Games coming up here in a few weeks. And Boston ended up out shooting Vegas 15-4 in the first period. They were all over the Golden Knights. So you want to talk about learning from their loss to Dallas. The Bruins came out on a mission against Vegas. And let's go to David Pastrnak about Boston needing a better start.
Great start. We talk about bouncing back and have a good start and get the crowd into it. And today, lucky enough, the good start and good 40 minutes was enough to win a game. Obviously they made a big push in the third, and we were able to hang on, and with the Chucky big block, obviously, and big win for us. Good team over there.
So David mentions a big push by Vegas in the third, and we'll get to that in a matter of minutes here. But yes, you absolutely had to have a bounce back performance from the Dallas game. And here's why. As I said earlier, the Bruins have now had 2 separate 6-game losing streaks this year. They've also had 2 very impressive stretches of winning this year following those losing streaks. The Bruins, after losing 6 in a row back in October, they ended up winning 7 in a row and 8 of 9. Recently, they lost 6 in a row, and then they turned around and won 6 in a row, and again, 8 of 9. And the reason I highlight that is the Bruins deserve a ton of credit for not cowering in the wake of a long losing streak and fighting back to claw their way back. We lose 6 in a row. We're going to win 6 in a row now. Now, it's no way to live consistently, but kudos to them to get themselves back into contention, back into the playoff picture. Because if the Bruins didn't have those 2 elongated winning streaks following those long losing streaks, then the season would have gone to shit. Like that's how important those 2 winning streaks were for the Bruins. Because if you lose 6 in a row twice and then you win 1, but then you go back and you lose 4 again, like it's curtains. So the Bruins having their elongated winning streaks has allowed them to kind of make up for their long losing streaks. But what they haven't been able to do yet this year is string together 2 consecutive long winning streaks, right? They've kind of been in damage control at different points this year. So here's an opportunity now for the Bruins to follow up their 6-game winning streak and winning 8 of 9. That bubble got bursted in their loss to Dallas, but they had 2 choices. They could lose to Dallas and then lose to Vegas at home. And then, oh boy, now you've lost to Dallas and Vegas. Now you got Montreal. All of a sudden, now it might be a 3-game losing streak, right? No. No, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to do that this time around. We're going to beat Vegas. We're going to cut the snake off at the head. We're not going to allow that loss to Dallas to turn into a loss to Vegas now, because you got every reason to. Vegas is a very good team. We're not going to let that loss to Dallas turn into a loss to Vegas, and then let that turn into a loss to Dallas, Vegas, and Montreal. And then now you're getting tight as you play Nashville and Philly next week. Maybe you start to feel some pressure, right? How do you avoid that? You start the game on time and you play with your hair on fire. And that's exactly what the Bruins did in the first period. The second period was more evenly played. I think the shots were 8-8. But it was David Pastrnak who had the lone goal of the period. And Elias Lindholm is a guy who starts that play in front of Boston's net. Elias is somebody who, for my money, doesn't do enough at 5-on-5 for the Bruins. He does a lot of his damage on the power play. I would say 75% of Elias Lindholm's points this year have been on the power play. I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. But it is significant, right? Well, that was a 5-on-5 play that starts with Elias Lindholm in his own zone with a nice bank pass to David Pastrnak in the neutral zone from deep in Boston's own zone. David finds some empty ice for Nikita Zadorov to skate into. Zadorov grabs the puck at the right circle in Vegas's end, gives Tomas Hertl a what for, and shoulders him away, finds David in the slot for a one-timer 4-0 Boston. Okay. Well, now you start to wonder, maybe Vegas will feel like we felt in Dallas, right? Like we went to Dallas, we were losing 4-0 after 2, and it turned into 6-0. Because it's easy when you're down 3, 4, 5 goals with one period to go to sit there and look around the locker room and say, hey, you know what, fellas? Tonight's just not our night. It's just not our night. Let's just kind of get this one over with and head back to the hotel and focus on the next one. It was very easy for Vegas to do that. That's what the Bruins did in Dallas. No, not the Vegas Golden Knights. They aren't gonna they're not gonna let that happen. They're too good. They're too prideful. They have too much experience in that room. Now, the Bruins could have made that happen if they came out and just took care of business. But what they did was what exactly they couldn't do. They allowed Vegas to score in the first minute of the third period. Well, now Vegas is sitting there saying, hey, guys, yeah, it's 4-1. We got 19 minutes to go here. Let's make something happen. Well, something did happen. They got a power play. Jeremy Lauzon, old friend Jeremy Lauzon, absolutely crushes David Pastrnak crossing the Vegas blue line. And it's a clean hit. It's a vicious hit, but it was a clean hit. And Husnudinov ends up taking a roughing penalty, which, by the way, was kind of a soft call. I mean, he didn't really do anything. But he was trying to stand up for Pastrnak, and the refs called him for roughing. So Vegas goes to the power play, and they score. Mark Stone finds Tomas Hertl in the slot. It's now 4-2 with over half a period to go. Well, lo and behold, Vegas finds a way to make it 4-3. And then you get some really tense moments. I think Vegas had a power play down a goal. They pulled the goalie a couple times down a goal. And they were all over Boston in the third period. They outshot the Bruins 21-5. And they won in the faceoff circle 36 of 62. That's good for 58.1% of the draws. So that's back-to-back games now where the Bruins have been bullied in the faceoff circle. And the Bruins are a pretty good faceoff team throughout the course of the season for the most part, but these last two games, they were not successful. So Vegas pulls the goalie, they're down a goal, and the Bruins just keep making life hard on themselves. And Victor Arvidsson takes a needless icing penalty, Victor Arvidsson does a needless ice. Hampus Lindholm, again, needlessly ices the puck, and it just continues to snowball on the Bruins. Jack Eichel gets a one-timer, goes right off of Charlie McAvoy's foot. Ouch. So Vegas kind of threw the kitchen sink at Boston in the third. And fortunately for the Bruins, they were able to hang on for the win. but it was not a pretty win at all. But Charlie McAvoy after the game spoke about that. He also talked about how the Bruins know that they have been Jekyll and Hyde this year, that they've been a roller coaster ride. And he talked about how the Bruins knew that they needed to come in and right the wrongs of earlier in the season. Don't let the losses pile up. And that's exactly what the Bruins did. They were able to get the win. And here's Charlie McAvoy talking about just that.
Obviously not the third period that we wanted. We'd like to, to dictate a little bit more and, maintain that lead, better than we did. But at the end of the day, we still saw it through and got 2 points. So, that's all that matters.
What have you liked about the way the team has bounced back this year?
Yeah, well, we talked before the game that this game was huge. This was a really important game. Obviously, everybody knows our team. We've been a little bit of up and down, and we talked about the importance of this game and not creating a losing streak and something where we're trying to dig our way out of like we have been. So I think we came out strong. Special teams was great, and it was really important for us and to capitalize on home ice. We've been really good here, feeding off the fans.
They have been good on home ice, and that's another element that I wanted to talk about as well. Is the Bruins have now won 6 games in a row at TD Garden, so the home cooking is there. They're feeling good in front of the home fans, and that is going to need to continue on Saturday night when they host the Montreal Canadiens. Well, listen, I have the caption here, rivalry renewed. I know the word renewed would imply that the rivalry had cooled off a bit. How could that be? How could that be? How could the Boston Bruins and the Montreal Canadiens, the best rivalry in the NHL, one of the best rivalries in sports, how could that have possibly cooled off? Well, it did. It did cool off. It's cooled off for quite some time. This season has been the first time in a long time where Bruins Canadiens games have had some meaning and some hatred and some vigor. Both Canadiens Bruins games this year have started off with fights off the opening draw. So let's set the stage and then we'll backtrack, because I do kind of want to go over for a few minutes about why the rivalry cooled off at some point and why it's starting to finally come back into the picture. So right now, as I said off the top, the Bruins are 29-20-2. They have 60 points, a .588 win percentage. They're 5th in the Atlantic, and they are wild card 2 on both points and points percentage. The Montreal Canadiens, they are 28-16-7, 63 points, a 6.18 points percentage, and they are 3rd in the Atlantic Division on both points and points percentage. The two teams are 1-1 head-to-head against each other this season. The Bruins won 3-2 in Montreal back on November 15th, and then the Canadiens won 6-2 in Boston back on December 23rd. Now let's talk about those two games for a second, because November 15th was in the middle of the Bruins' 7-game win streak earlier this year, back in November. And that game at the time was for first place in the Atlantic Division. It was a good hockey night in Canada Saturday night, Bruins, Canadiens, and there was some juice behind that game. There really was. And that game starts off with Nikita Zadorov fighting Strobel on Montreal. Jeannot fights Jack-Eye. That's the game that Charlie McAvoy gets a slap shot to the face from Noah Dobson. And the Bruins found a way to win that game. December 23rd was a 6-2 win for the Canadiens, but it was a lot closer than the score would indicate, certainly through the first 2 periods, because if you remember, it was a 2-2 game, and it looked as though the Bruins had taken a 3-2 lead on an Elias Lindholm goal late in the second. The refs called it no goal on the ice for goalie interference. I think it was Pasternak that they said made contact with Fowler, but it was super, super minimal. I don't even know if there was any contact at all. It was like very, 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 very bare minimum. And the ref had called it a no goal on the ice. So in order to overturn the call on the ice, it's got to be 110% evidence that, the ref was wrong. Had the ref called it a goal on the ice, then same thing. The evidence would have had to have been irrefutable to overturn it. So it really kind of came down to what the call on the ice was initially, because it deterred the Bruins from wanting to challenge it because they didn't want to go on the penalty kill in a 2-2 game if they got it wrong. So again, I think the Bruins should have had a 3-2 lead heading into the third period, but they didn't. It was 2-2. And then Montreal capitalizes in the third when Nikita Zadorov snaps his stick in half on a pass attempt in his own zone regrouping. Montreal goes in 3-2 lead. And then the Bruins just fell apart in the discipline category. And the wheels fell off. Montreal had multiple power play goals, and it becomes a 6-2 game. And by the way, that going back to the Dallas game for a second, that was something that the Bruins did in the Dallas game that cost them. Like they only had 3 penalties against Dallas, but they were all in the first period. You cannot take parades to the penalty box in short order. If you get a penalty in the first period and then midway through the second and then maybe in the third, like, okay, your penalties are spaced out, but the Bruins have this knack when things are going poorly to just have a parade to the box. And that is not what you want. So as it pertains to the Bruins and the Canadiens, Montreal gets that win 6-2. Now, let's talk about the rivalry because it took a backseat for a long time. The Bruins and Canadiens last playoff meeting was in the spring of 2014. Since then, the Canadiens and the Bruins were kind of reversed. The Bruins were always competing for the Stanley Cup. They were always a top 5 team in the league. Montreal was a bottom 5 team for a long time. So there was a lack of playoff meetings. Then COVID happened in 2019, and the Bruins and the Canadiens the year afterwards got put into different divisions. There was a stretch after COVID where the Bruins and Canadiens didn't have a game in nearly 2 calendar years for one reason or the other. And so the rivalry has definitely taken a backseat. The Bruins, meanwhile, had playoff meetings against a bunch against the Maple Leafs, the Hurricanes, the Panthers, the Lightning. Like, playoffs is what drives rivals, right? Now, obviously, the Bruins and Canadiens are always going to be a rivalry, right? The history is there. But in terms of like modern day rivals, if you're not playing somebody very often in meaningful games and both teams aren't good, there's not going to be a ton of hatred. So fortunately for the Bruins and the Canadiens, both teams are pretty good right now. And the longest playoff drought they've ever had has been 12 years from 1931 to 1943. I'm talking a head-to-head playoff drought. 12 years from 1931 to 1943. As I said, their last playoff meeting was 2014, and right now it's 2026. So if the Bruins and the Canadiens meet in the playoffs this year, they will tie what was a previous head-to-head playoff drought of 12 years. If the Bruins and Canadiens don't play in the playoffs this year, then it will become at least 13 years between playoff appearances against each other, assuming that they meet next year, which obviously isn't a guarantee. So I have rivalry renewed in the subject ticker here. Not just this season because it's their third meeting of the year, third and final, and the first 2 are pretty heated. But just generally speaking, I feel like the Bruins-Canadiens rivalry has renewed. Montreal being good again is great for the NHL. It's great for the sport. And just like the Yankees being good is good for baseball, it's always good to have the most historic franchises that have the most titles good because it gives people somebody to hate. But as it pertains to the Bruins-Canadiens rivalry, it is always good and better when both teams are good. So I'm looking forward to that game. Oh, by the way, the Bruins will be wearing their white uniforms at home against Montreal on Saturday. So if you're somebody who enjoys teams wearing white uniforms at home, which I do, I grew up on white uniforms at home. And then in 04, 05, or sorry, 03, 04, the NHL switched back to dark uniforms at home, which is great too. But the way I look at it is, if the home team is going to wear the same uniform every day, every game for the home fans, you might as well allow the other teams to come in, the visiting teams, and wear dark so you can see different colors around the league, right? Like, you're going to see the Bruins in one uniform regardless. They're going to be in dark or white. So if you're going to see the Bruins in one uniform, you might as well see the Bruins in the same white template. And then because white uniforms, like, the colors change and the logos change, but a white uniform is a white uniform. So it's cool to get to see the dark uniforms from all the other teams around the league come into town. With that said, I think what the NHL should do is just wear whatever you want it at home. Like, it maybe you wear dark at home for 30 of your 41 home games, and then the other 10 or 11 you wear white. Just switch it up. You know what I mean? Anyway, so if that floats your boat, if you're a big uniform buff and you want to see the Bruins wear white at home, Saturday night is your night, and that's a great uniform matchup too. The Canadiens red, white, and blue on Boston ice. That's a great uniform matchup. So very much looking forward to that. All right, let us now move along to some questions from you, the listeners, that I have gathered from different conversations online. I apologize if yours is not up here. There are a lot of comments that I go through, but I think for these Q&A segments, it's always best to just grab like 5 to 10 just to kind of keep it brief. But you never know if I will grab yours or not. So definitely always be responsive online, because I like I said, I love interacting with everybody. So let's go right now to let's go to Maria in Watertown. Start off with Maria. She says the Bruins' name has been mentioned in 2 notable trade rumors, Rasmus Andersson and now Zachary Whitecloud. My question is simple. Why? Well, Maria, let's start with Rasmus Andersson. I think that one makes more sense, right? I mean, he fills a need for the Bruins as a top 4 right shot defenseman. And at 29 years old, he fits in with the age and prime of Boston's core players right now. Charlie McAvoy is 28. David Pastrnak is 29. Elias Lindholm, Hampus Lindholm are 31. Nikita Zadorov is 30. Morgan Geekie is 27. Jeremy Swayman's 27. So Rasmus Andersson, fills a need for Boston as a right shot top 4 defenseman behind Charlie McAvoy, and he fits the current team's core's age range. The thing about Andersson for me was the price. As I said on here, was not really willing to give up a 2026 first-round pick for him at all, whether it was Boston's own or Toronto's. Boston's 2027 pick, I think I was, or one of Boston's 2027 picks, whether it was the Bruins or the one that they own from Florida. I think I'd obviously rather it be Florida's because they might finish better than the Bruins, but either one of those picks for Andersson, as long as Andersson had an extension in place, I think I was willing to do, because if you think about it, that 2027 first rounder is still a year and a half away from being drafted, which means he's probably 2.5, 3.5 years away, maybe even 4.5 years away from playing for the Boston Bruins. Well, at that point in time, David Pastrnak is now 34, 35. Charlie McAvoy is 33, 34. Morgan Geekie and Jeremy Swayman, they're 31. The Lindholms, if they're still around, they're 36, 37. Zadorov is 36. You know what I mean? So you have to walk that line of building for your future while still being mindful of your present. And I feel like Rasmus Andersson, for a 27 first and maybe Lori, as long as Andersson had an extension, I think that one would have been fine. But I don't think with a 26 pick it would have been. And to be fair, that wasn't what was reported. Elliot Friedman said on 32 Thoughts earlier in the week that from what he heard, it was not Boston's pick from Toronto in 26 that was on the table, rather one of their 27 first-round picks and Lohrei. So that's good news to know that the Bruins weren't willing to give up one of those 26 first for Anderson, because I don't think they should have. As for Zachary Whitecloud, I think that's as simple as Craig Conroy probably saying to Don Sweeney, hey, Don, we know that we were talking with you about Rasmus, and obviously he went to Vegas. We got Whitecloud from Vegas. We know you still need a right shot, top 4 defenseman. We know you wanted a steak. How about a burger? Now, I don't think Sweeney would have paid the same price for a burger, but I think it was Craig Conroy. And this is not reported, but the rumors you're talking about, Maria, theoretically, it would be Craig Conroy being like, hey, Don, we know you lost out on Rasmus, but for a lesser price, would you be willing to, do you think you want Zach Whitecloud? Now, Zach Whitecloud's 29 years old. I think he's better than Andrew Peeke and Henry Jokiharju, but I don't think he's that much better than them. I mean, he is, but he's not like, I think he's like a fringe 4 or 5 guy, whereas Jokiharju and Peeke, I think, are straight up just like 6s. But I don't co-sign on Whitecloud. Like I think they're all set with that. There was no need for that. I'm not really sure if there was any smoke to that fire anyway. No pun intended to him now being a Calgary Flame. So thank you for the question, Maria. I hope that answers it. Like I said, Anderson was just a matter of fit in lining up with the other guys' primes. It was all about cost for him. If the cost was right, it makes sense, but the cost wasn't. Or the cost I think would have been a 27 first and Lohrei. I just don't think Anderson wanted to do the extension. He wanted to go to Vegas. So that's that. Let's see. 7-year Chris Stitch. Big 2 points. I'll take them. Yes, that is in reference to something I said following the Bruins win over Vegas, which was I said something along the lines of talk about getting comfortable with a lead. But, Bruins will take the 2 points against Vegas and head into their game against Montreal. So, yeah, that's exactly right. There's a learning curve there. I think you can learn from that game against Vegas. Never get too comfortable. You always have to step on the throat of the snake, and you never let the snake breathe. And I think Boston learned a valuable lesson against Vegas. Let's see. Chuck here says, was he ever a Bruin? So this is in response to Vladislav Kolyachonok going from Dallas to Boston off of waivers, and then less than a month later going back to Dallas when Boston put him on waivers. So I saw a lot of people with the not the Homer Simpson. It's the gift from the Simpsons of the guy like walking into the room and then leaving. Yeah, Chuck, I don't even know if a cup of coffee does it justice. I think it was more of a tiny sip of coffee. He was a Bruin. I think he only played 1 game too for Boston. I could be wrong about that. Bobby Brewski quote tweeted me with, so I said during the Dallas game, this would be a great time for Geeky to get on the board. Now this was earlier in the game when it was still a contest. And it turns out that Geeky did score that game. It was just a little bit later on. But Bobby Brewski from the Only Bruins podcast quote tweeted me with Morgan Geeky's infamous tweet saying, damn, bro, tell me how you really feel, which was Morgan responding to Bobby's co-host Brett last year when I think he went pretty hard in the paint on Geeky, and that was a pretty funny moment. That went viral. So yeah, Bobby, tell me how you feel, bro. Arnold says, sneaky bad win. Without that 4-minute power play, we lose. Corpy won this game. So, Arnold, I know you say sneaky here because that's you saying it wasn't a really bad win. It was a sneaky bad win, right? I understand what you're saying. I do think, though, that that's a little harsh, even with the word sneaky in there, because, the Bruins were far and away the better team for the first 20 minutes, and I think it's fairly easy to argue they were the better team through 40. And they had a 4-0 lead. 2 of them were 5-on-5. So, it's not like the power play goals were the only thing that gave them the lead. And just to add to that, while yes, Vegas was all over Boston, like dogs on raw meat in the third period, and that's why you're saying it was a sneaky bad win. I don't totally discount what you're saying. I do hear what you're saying. But I will just say, I think part of the reason why Vegas dominated Boston in the third was because Boston got too comfortable with a 4-goal lead, and Vegas knew they had to do something to get back into the game. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like the Bruins' comfortability opened the door for it. Which, to your point, so it's a sneaky bad win because they got too comfortable. But they were the better team for the first 40. And I guess what I'm saying is, if the Bruins entered the third period with a 2-1 lead, I don't think they get as loose. I don't think they play as loose in the third, and I don't think Vegas skates all around them. You know what I mean? I feel like it was kind of the combination of that. Like the Bruins got smoked in the third because they were too comfortable with their big lead. Had they not had a big lead, I don't know if they play as loosey. So, but yeah, I mean, listen, it wasn't a good third period at all. So they were kind of lucky to get away with the 2 points there because, you know, Vegas made it 4-3. They had the goalie pulled for a few minutes. You had Jack Eichel in the slot down a goal multiple times. Like that game could have easily gone 4-4 and then gone to overtime or a shootout, and then Vegas gets to win. And that would have been a devastating, and I mean devastating, loss for Boston, especially with Montreal on the horizon on Saturday night. So I think that's a little harsh, Arnold, but I hear what you're saying. I do. So thank you for that comment. George here says on Twitter, if the Bees take 8 of the 10 points in this 5-game stretch and split in Florida before the Olympic break, we're in good shape. Yeah, listen, George, I agree with you. And I think that's kind of where I was getting at earlier, which is the one thing the Bruins have done damage control twice this year, right? 2 6-game losing streaks followed up with 2 6 and 7-game winning streaks. That's damage control if I've ever heard it. And they deserve credit for not letting their season totally slip away and battling back. But the one thing that they haven't done this year, as I said earlier, is compile long winning streaks in short order, right? So you have a 6-game winning streak, then you lose to Dallas. Okay, go on another one. Go on a 3 or 4-game winning streak now. Go on a 5-game winning streak. Go to your point. Go 5-1-1 now before the Olympic break. You know, I mean, you just beat Vegas. Go beat Montreal. Go beat Montreal, then go beat Philly and go beat Nashville. Go beat the Rangers at Madison Square Garden. The Rangers already put out a letter that they're selling this year. They've been terrible overall, but especially at MSG. Go rattle off some wins. And then to your point, yeah, then you have Tampa Bay and Florida in February before the Olympic break. So if they could rattle off 8 of 10 points in the next, 5 games, like, hey, that's unbelievable. I mean, 6 or 7 would be good too. So thank you for the question there, George. Tony on Twitter says, pretty tough against an entire all-star roster. I'll take the 2 points. So again, that's in reference to my commentary following the Bruins win over Vegas, saying that they, talk about getting too comfortable with a lead and how they, narrowly escaped and whatnot. I mean, Tony, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, but you have a 4-0 lead. I mean, you got a 4-0 lead against an all-star roster, right? So now we're gonna all of a sudden say it's okay to almost blow it because you're playing that same roster in the final 20 minutes. I mean, yeah, you're right. Like, we'll take the 2 points, but listen, I don't like that. Like, it's the NHL. The NHL is the NHL. You're all pro athletes. Like, yeah, Vegas's roster is better, but like, no, I'm sorry. You don't go up 4-0 heading into the third and then escape by the skin of your teeth and then say, hey, well, they're an all-star roster. No, fuck that. I mean, the Bruins got off to a 4-0 lead against that same team. So, yeah, like, take the 2 points, but I don't like making excuses because they're playing a better team on paper. I mean, nah, that's a loser's mentality, right? Bruins diehards, my buddy Court. So I was on Court's podcast this week, if you heard it, and awesome guy. And we had talked about Robert Thomas because Dom Tiano mentioned online that he had been hearing that, or speculating that Don Sweeney and Doug Armstrong, the GM of the St. Louis Blues, who are both involved with Hockey Canada, were together recently talking a lot of Hockey Canada, but also potentially talking non-Hockey Canada, which alludes to the fact of the potentially having some players in the Blues that the Bruins could be interested in, because St. Louis is not having a good year at all. And so on the Skate podcast, me and Scott McLaughlin were talking about this, and Scott brought up the hypothetical of, would you trade James Higgins for Robert Thomas? And I wasn't prepared to answer that. And then when I was talking with Court on his Bruins Diehards podcast, I brought up the question to him, and we discussed it for a while. So this tweet here from Court is actually a prompt and a link to that video. Dallas dominates the Bruins in their latest loss. How would Robert Thomas look in a Bruins uniform, and what would it cost? Brian stops by to discuss, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to go into it too much right now, but I mean, how do you feel about that prompt? Like, would you trade Higgins for Robert Thomas 1-for-1? I mean, Robert Thomas is a legit 1C in this league. He's 26 years old, so he's still entering his prime. James Higgins, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. Like, obviously we know James Higgins as a prospect, and I think the sky's the limit for James Higgins, but it's when you don't know how somebody will translate at the NHL level, but you have this guy that you do know how they translate because they're doing it, and they're the right age, and they're under cost, they're under term, and they have good cost control. Yeah, it made for a fun conversation. I'll say this: I would be hesitant to trade James Higgins for any. I want to see the kid in the Spoke B. I don't think St. Louis is trading away Robert Thomas. So, but if they were ever enticed to do it, if I was Boston, I would float a couple of firsts on the table, and then maybe a roster player, a couple of prospects if you can. I'm sure St. Louis would want Higgins back. So I just don't think it's happening at all. I don't think that trade's happening. Even though it's just a fun conversation, I don't think St. Louis is trading Robert Thomas, and I don't think Boston's interested in getting rid of James Higgins. So anyway, there are some comments. Thank you all for always interacting with me online. I very much appreciate it. And that'll do it for this episode. So thank you all very much for listening. Once again, please subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube. If that is your preferred method to consume podcast, you can subscribe to the PuckUps on Apple, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. You can email me, info@thepuckups.com. Comment to me on Twitter @BrianDFelice_, or at the PuckUps. And as I said earlier, you can leave a voicemail to be aired on the show, 617-539-6958. Thank you all very much for listening. Stay safe this weekend. A lot of snow. They're talking about a foot, maybe 2. A lot of below freezing temps. Okay, so stay safe, stay warm. Don't travel if you don't have to. Enjoy Patriots, Broncos, AFC Championship on Sunday. And enjoy Bruins, Canadiens on Saturday. And I will be back to talk to you next week. Take care.